Ševčík School of Bowing Technique. Today we'll be discussing the exercise number 4. If you haven't already seen it, I have another video on exercise 5, which is super fun because it has 260 bowing variations in it. But today I wanted to back up a little bit and show you an easier version of similar types of exercises. And I highly recommend you go and visit that video if you haven't seen it, because I'll just be going over just some general things on Ševčík 4, but you may pick up a few more valuable tips in the other video as well. So we'll jump right in. This exercise is pretty easy for like the late beginners, so I will often teach this to my younger students as their first bowing variation exercise. I really enjoy teaching this because we have a beautiful duet part. As you'll see, I'm going to insert a clip here soon, and also the notes aren't too bad, and also there are a few interesting notes, like we'll have like a low 1 and a high 3, so it's a great chance to kind of incorporate these new skills into an exercise that they'll be playing again and again and again. And since the notes are not too difficult this time, as opposed to a Ševčík 5, the variations are a little bit simpler, as well. So it's kind of a nice place to start and get warmed up. I usually don't stay too long on this one, maybe, several weeks. Maybe like we'll do 5 variations or so, and then, judging by the level of the student and what I think he or she needs at the time, then we'll be ready to move on to the next Ševčík number 5. Okay, so I do hope to do another installment, and we'll be covering Ševčík 6 because that one's also a lot of fun and it has more moving notes, which means that the variations are going to be a bit different from Ševčík 4 and 5. So the first thing I do, of course, is just have the student learn the theme, and if you feel it's helpful, you can memorize it or have your student memorize it as well. And that way, when it's time to do the variations, you can focus a little bit more on the bowings and be fumbling with the notes a bit here and there. So I'll go ahead and insert a clip here showing the original theme, and then we'll come back and then talk about some of the variations. So once the theme is learned, then probably the first variation I would do is number 2. So variation number 2 has a series of quarter note rest, quarter note rest. So we're turning the half note into one quarter note, and then we are practicing a rest. Now, one of the most important things about this book, if you haven't, if this is your first time trying this, is the bow distribution. So bow distribution is basically how much bow we're using and where in the bow. Those two things matter very, very, very much. So let's say we're using half a bow. The bow, half a bow could be in the center of the bow, it could be in the lower half of the bow, it could be in the upper half of the bow, it could be anywhere. So those are the three normal, more typical options. So that's just an example. So not only do we want to know how much are we using, but where will we be? So variation 2 has this quarter note and quarter note rest pattern, and it does instruct you to use whole bow. So there are little abbreviations underneath all the notes, and then if you check in the beginning of the book, right before Ševčík exercise number 1, you will see the abbreviations and what they mean. So there's going to be explanations there. So I'm going to insert a clip here. You'll see that I'm using the entire bow. I'm really using lots of bow speed, and then I'm really holding the full value of the quarter note rest. Variation 2. Variation 12 is also a lot of fun because we're taking a 4/4 time signature and converting it to a 3/4 time signature. So it sort of is a little bit challenging mentally, and then feeling the new rhythm and the new pulse and the new grouping. Also, it's great to be changing the bow speeds because it indicates that you have to use the full bow for both notes. So there's a half note and then there's a quarter note. I'll be inserting a clip here. And so for a half note, you're going to have to spend the whole bow and actually travel slowly. And then for the quarter note, you're going to have to travel the bow faster. So you're going to have to double your bow speed for the quarter note. So it's really, really good. And it's a great way to kind of segue into some of the other more complicated variations. Variation 13. So another really educational variation to do would be 32. This is also a variation in 3/4 meter. And what we're going to do is use a whole bow on the first note, and then use half bows on the second and third note. So this is really, really good. You'll see in the demo coming up here that it's going to be, frog to tip, full bow, but it's actually quite legato. So you want to really sustain the note, and then after that you'll be at the tip. So you'll have two notes from tip to mid, mid to tip. So just staying up in that area. And I really challenge my students to divide the bow really, really exactly in half. And the next measure is actually going to be the reverse. So we're starting at the tip now, and we have to really zip the bow to the frog in one beat in a quarter note's time. And then we're at the frog now. We have two half bows, and those are both staccato. I think I forgot to mention that. One more variation that's a lot of fun and a bit challenging is going to be number 49. So that has sort of a syncopated rhythm. We have a quarter note, half note, and then quarter note. I'll be inserting a clip soon here. And so we have also a slur. So the first 3 beats are going to be slurred in one bow, and that's a full bow. And then the last beat is just a quarter note, and we have to go all the way back to the frog again. So we're going to be using a very fast bow speed. So, you know, really holding on for a full half note value, you know, as you're saving bow, and then suddenly changing your bow speed to going faster. It's so good. It's good for you. So I really highly recommend you try this one, or try it on your student if you're a teacher. And everything's basically legato. So, you know, what I really have my students do is look at every facet of the variation that's different from the theme. So basically we look at the rhythm. How has the rhythm been changed? And, you know, how has the bowing been changed? Are there any slurs added? You know, and then we look at the bow distribution. So which part of the bow should we be in? How much bow should we be using? And then finally, we don't want to forget also the articulation. So sometimes they show you to play an accent, or they'll tell you to, you'll see that, you know, dash on top. That's called a tenuto mark. Just generally, it's not a big deal, but it could mean several things. But in this case, most of the time I just ask the student to just really elongate the note for the full value. And then finally, the last thing would be dynamics, if any. A lot of these subject variations don't have dynamics in towards the beginning, but they will be added later on. So you also want to check for that. So take a look here at variation 49. Gives them that vocabulary, you know, where maybe if they're playing, you know, pieces, they're solo pieces, that, you know, it might only have certain types of, you know, bowings in those pieces, even, you know, piece after piece after piece. But one day they're going to need to have this certain type of bowing, and often I find that they've already learned it because of Ševčík or because of fiddle magic. We've already done it, so I say, hey, remember that fiddle magic exercise, or remember that Ševčík we did here. And then if they forgot, then we open up the book and I have them look at it and they go, oh yeah. So I tell them, see, you already know how to do that. And so they already can, you know, their muscles are familiar with this action. So it's not as if they need to learn something completely new, a choreography they've never learned before, you know, with their arms. And also be learning a brand new piece. So that's kind of overwhelming at times, you know, depending on the student. So we're just kind of, you know, jumping around, getting a sampling, and I'm showing you some of the ones that I find are just so good for my students. It's a great workout. It's a challenge. It's like taking your vitamins every day. It's really, really good.